Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, ciao, bonjour, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hey, my name is Jadley. Welcome to Reading with Your Kids. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville, located in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so very honored and so very happy that you join us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. We do that by sharing fun, thoughtful, and thought-provoking conversations with fascinating people who just happen to be writing books for kids of all ages. You can join us in that mission by telling all of your family and friends, your kids' teachers, principals, librarian, all about the show, and let them know that they can hear us on the WREB AM/FM 24/7 radio network, and they can find us on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Audible, Good Pods, Podcast Addict, CastBox, Player FM, Boomplay, Ghana, wherever you find your favorite shows. Two really amazing guests for you today. Charlotte Cheng will be here to celebrate I Miss You Most. And later in the show, we'll be meeting Rami Jandali. He's celebrating two books, An Almond All Alone and Blueberry Fairy. This episode is brought to you by Daphne Draws Data. From the imaginative mind of best-selling author Cole Nussbaumer Knaflick and the vibrant illustrations of John Skewers comes a story that will captivate kids and grown-ups alike. Daphne is not your ordinary dragon. She doesn't breathe fire. She breathes life into numbers, turning them into pictures that solve mysteries, forge friendships, and save the day. Daphne's journey celebrates unique talents, the power of teamwork, and the beauty of seeing the world through a different lens. This dragon's tale is perfect for parents and educators to inspire the next generation of curious minds and innovative thinkers. Get your copy today. Daphne Draws Data. Join us right now from San Mateo in the great state of California. Our guest is here today to celebrate her beautiful new children's book. Is called I Miss You Most. Please welcome to the show, Charlotte Cheng. Charlotte, how are you?
I'm doing great. Really excited to talk about I Miss You Most, my new book coming out.
Yeah. You know, Charlotte and I just had a great little conversation about Taiwan and China and family and culture, and I can't wait for you to tell us about the book.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It's a story that's very near and dear to my heart.
Yeah. So tell us about it. Who are we going to meet in I Miss You Most?
Well, I Miss You Most is about a girl who misses her grandfather. In Taiwan, I call my grandfather Akong, and he has passed away. So it's a story of loss, but also of comfort, because she ends up seeing and remembering him in a lot of little things that she does every day with her family and by herself that reminds her of her grandfather. So it's a great story that can be a great conversation starter for families who might have experienced loss. And it's also a great reminder that people who have passed away still live on in you and in the memories that you keep about them. So I have a seashell that sits right at my desk right here, and it's actually my Akong's seashell. And I see it every day, and it helps me remember him and remember how much he loved the sea. So there's pieces like that in the book that just really helps kids process that concept of loss. Yeah.
When you started to write the book, obviously it was coming from a place in your heart. Did you feel that you changed at all, or as you were writing the book?
If I changed myself inside? Yeah, I can give you a little background about the story. So I had my daughter a few years ago in 2019, and I was very, very excited for her to meet my grandparents. They lived in Taiwan at that time, and we scheduled a trip to go see them in March of 2020. As many of you knew, the world sort of shut down during that time, and we had to cancel the trip. And I was very heartbroken because the last time I had seen my grandparents, my akong, I was pregnant with her. And that was my dearest memory, was telling my akong about my baby to be, and how happy he was for me and how excited he was to meet her. And I was just heartbroken, and we said, okay, we will plan it for the future. And unfortunately, the very next year he passed away. And I was unable to see him too, because back then, you had a quarantine for a very long time in Taiwan. And so I had to attend his funeral via Zoom. And I just remember just crying, like, while watching it in Zoom, because just misconnecting with my family. And my daughter was asking, like, hey, why are you sad? And I had to explain the loss of my akong. And it was sort of hard. And while I was explaining it, all of a sudden, like, I wanted to write something. And it just came out of me in a few hours, really, this story. It's in rhyme, so it's almost like a poem in honor of my akong. And I was able to read that to my daughter and sort of have her understand how I was feeling and how it would feel if you lost a loved one that you really, really do miss. And so it's really transformed the way I talk about loss with my daughter. So ever since then, we've had a loved one whose dog passed away, and she was able to use the lessons she learned in the story to help our friend process the loss. She would draw pictures of the dog and give it to her, and share memories that she had of the dog and things like that. So it really has changed the way where I've thought about how do I talk to kids about loss, and then also how to to live on, let the memory of my akong live on as well. So those two things really changed me after I wrote the story.
We've talked here in the podcast a lot about how things have changed. When I was growing up, we knew that people died, but we didn't talk about it. My parents never spoke to me. I didn't attend a funeral or wake until my grandfather passed when I was 16. And we had heard all these, but it was such, don't talk. And I'm so happy now. I know my beautiful wife and I, my dad passed when my son was 6, and my grandmother passed when he was a year old, and we were taking him to, the different services and whatnot, and people, and when friends and other relatives would pass, both my son and when my daughter came, we'd take them, and a lot of people would be like, what are you doing? Kids don't belong here. And it's like, this is part of life. This is part of life, and we need to help them understand that. So I'm really happy that you've created this book, and that we as a culture are starting to speak more with our kids about loss and helping them process those feelings.
Yes, and you'd be surprised how much children see. I think that's something that we really do underestimate, that they see you when you're mourning and when you're sad. And it's so important to have that conversation so they understand it. Now, it really opened my eyes when I visited a school. I've been in education for over 20 years, and I love visiting schools and talking to kids, using my books or all sorts of things. I've brought robots to the schools and things like that. But this one time I was bringing a book I had written in the past called Bobo's Colorful Chinese New Year. And our Chinese New Year, a great tradition of Chinese New Year is we remember our ancestors. We burn incense and we bring fruit. We have pictures of them up. And it's really interesting because the kids at the school, a lot of them celebrate Dia de los Muertos as well. And it was a first grade class, and it's a very short book. It's a board book. And the kids became fixated by this concept of remembering your loved ones from the past. And every kid in that class wanted to share a memory, saying that, oh, my grandfather passed away. There's a picture of my grandfather now in the house, and when my mom sees the picture, she feels really sad. So they wanted to talk about it, right? And sometimes I think the scary thing about it is we don't know what to say. And so I wrote this book in the hope that, it helps families have that conversation in a healthy way and also in a positive way. It starts very sad. And I love the illustrator, Cindy Ann. She also lost her grandfather the same year as me. And so it is, the grandfather in this story is a combination of both of our grandfathers, which I love. And in the very beginning, the images are so dark and sad. It's images of where she really feels the loss. But at the end, the colors are so bright and lovely because she realizes that her grandfather lives on in her. And so you can see how this is sort of a journey for a family to accept that you are very sad that you miss that loved one, but then that we can keep living on and remember them in a positive way. So my akong was a teacher, right? So every time I'm in the school, every time I'm talking to a kid, he lives on in me as well.
Yeah. So neat. Did you ever think that, you've enabled your grandfather to not only teach when you're in a classroom, but he's kind of teaching through the book to thousands of kids he'll never meet?
Yes, yeah, and the dedication, and I will give a shout out. I love reading dedications of books, even picture books, because you can sort of see where authors and illustrators are getting inspired. And this one I said, from my akong, a teacher, an artist, and a generous soul, at last my daughter can meet you through the memories in this book. And so to me, you get to see this amazing man of like how much he loved the sea, how much he played mahjong, much he loved oolong tea, how much I even snuck in the National Geographic magazine. I asked Cindy to sneak that in because he collected National Geographic magazine, so I want that to live on as well. So yes, I'm really very hopeful that many people can meet him through this book. And my next two books, actually, next year, are also about my other akong who started a popsicle company, and my amas and their purses. I don't know about you, but my grandmothers had very, very large purses full of wonderful surprises inside. So a lot of my stories are passing on that memory, passing on the heritage of being Taiwanese, and hoping that these books can reach not only kids who can feel seen because they're Asian or they're Taiwanese, but also kids who want to learn more about other cultures. This book sort of helps them sort of subtly see that, but also connect with the story itself as well, because whether it's about loss or popsicles or anything like that.
Yeah. We love that books can be mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. I think it's so, it's the magic of books, I think. Let kids see themselves. It's so cool. But also, I think it's so very important for us to be able to look and see what another culture is like, see what a person who has to do things differently because of a disability, what their life is like. And I think it's a great way to help us and help our kids realize that we're really, despite our differences, we're all part of one beautiful human family.
Agreed. Like for example, I have a author friend who's from Nigeria, and she's coming out with a book next fall called The Night Market. And she basically, it's about night markets that she's experienced as a kid in Nigeria. But funnily enough, last year, her name's Sana Wedlick. I just wanted to plug her. But last year, I came out with a book called Night Market Rescue, about night markets in Taiwan. And we met at an author event, and we were just laughing so much that, oh my gosh, like we have both written books about night markets. There's this commonality, but our books are so different too, because night markets are also different in many ways, like coming from different cultures, and how both of our books can celebrate the two together. And so we want to do author events in the future. And then funnily enough, she also wrote a book called a naming ceremony, because they have naming ceremonies after the kid is born. They pick a name afterwards. But I also have a book coming out called A Name for Sister, about naming rituals for Chinese culture. So it's just meeting authors like that and realizing, like you said, I love celebrating the unique differences of different cultures and heritages, but also finding those wonderful, wonderful connections and commonalities so we can connect as humans from around the world.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. One of the things that anytime I have an author on from Nigeria or Rwanda, I always remind people who are listening that, yes, that's part of Africa. Africa is a continent. It's not a country. It's not a culture. It's a place where many, many countries are, many different cultures are. And the same with Asia. I think a lot of people are like, China, Taiwan, all those, Japan, all those places are the same, and you couldn't be further from the truth.
I agree. Part of why I was writing more and more stories about Taiwan and my heritage was I share this experience where if I say I'm from Taiwan, sometimes people, and they don't mean anything by it. They're like, "Oh, great. I love Thai food." Like from Thailand. And, I had to pause and correct and share, and then just like, oh, what's so unique about Taiwan? And I'm just going, oh, where do I begin? Right? How do I start? I was just talking to my husband about the unique history of Taiwan. We've had pirates, we have Spanish and Dutch families, we have coming over. There was from the Cultural Revolution in China, there are people who escaped China to live in Taiwan. There's so many parts of the story of Taiwan, and the food, the views. It's an island that has wonderful high mountains, lovely coasts. There's a very urban city full of culture and art. There's so much to share. But I was just like, I can't just write one book about Taiwan. I have to write many, right? Just to show the different dimensions. So, last year I had the privilege of, visiting the LA Times Book Festival, and I was invited by the Tourist Bureau of Taiwan because Night Market Rescue was selected as a book that they thought was a great way in which Taiwan was highlighted. And I was just so proud to be at the booth, connecting to other people who were Taiwanese or connecting with people who wanted to learn more about Taiwan, had been thinking about visiting. And I had my books there, but then they also had maps for the country and books and things, other books that they can learn about our island. And so, yeah, I agree. Books are a great way to expose people to not just one Asian country, but the many Asian countries. And I'm really proud of my author friend who's doing the same thing for her country from Nigeria as well.
That's wonderful. Wonderful. It sounds like there's so many ideas running around in your head. Do you ever have, do you have a technique of a way to kind of corral them and make sure? Because I have lots of ideas, but they're there and then they're gone. How do you kind of keep everything together so that the idea is still alive when you have time to expand and write on it?
Yeah, I do have a process. I will say Google Docs are my great friend. So I have one Google Doc that is just a list of picture book ideas, and I'll either write like a 1 or 2 sentence summary of what I think the book could be about, and sometimes I'll write small snippets and lines about it. I love Google Docs because I can write on the go. So I could be writing in a line getting boba. I could be writing while I'm riding in a car or on the subway or on the train. So when inspiration hits, it's at my fingertips. And then when I'm ready to sort of delve deeply into one of those story ideas, I spin out another Google Doc, and that's where I can start writing my manuscript. And usually I'm a bit of a plotter, so I will do a very short outline. Yes, you can outline picture books because I really want to plan that emotional arc, like in I Miss You Most, right? Starting with that sadness and that grief and building that arc into something of hope, right? And I do that with every single one of my stories. And then recently, Ben Sum-Shum is an author illustrator, and I saw him speak, and I was just like, oh, I'm having a little bit of writer's block. Because sometimes you get lost when you're writing the story. And he had a really great tip about at the very top of your document, write a 1 to 2 sentence reason of why you want to share the story or why you want to write the story. And I started doing that too, because while I'm in the weeds writing line by line the manuscript, sometimes you forget why you want to share this story, right? And I like checking in with myself to make sure I don't get lost along the way. So that's a tip for people who want to write stories, is just write that little reminder at the top, and that helps a lot. And the last thing is I get inspiration from a lot of people. My last book that came out, Roar Chu, A Dragon That Has a Cold, came from a joke that my daughter told me. And so I was just like, she's so proud. She walks around and is like, I came up with the title of the book. And I'm like, I agree. You totally did. And so that's sort of where I talk about hey, just look for inspiration. It could be from a conversation. I'm working on a book called The Pirate in Me, because my family comes from pirates. And I was talking to people about that. They're like, what? Like, what is that like? Being like having a pirate as an ancestor. And I said, there's many, many things I see in my, like the people in my family where we're very persistent and we're very passionate, that I'm like, yeah, I could see that. I could see how we come from pirates. And so I'm working on that story right now because I'm like, oh, there's something there. Why do I want to share that? Well, I want to share that for all the kids who feel like there's a pirate in them and they don't know how to practice being pirates in a healthy way. Because pirates can also cause a lot of chaos and grief, but there's also something beautiful about being a passionate pirate. And so I'm working on that. And so at the very top of my manuscript, I write that idea, that this is why I want to share the story. And so I'm chipping away at it. I remember it and I don't get lost along the way.
Awesome. We had an author on who was celebrating a real life female pirate from Asia. That way, I guess, one of the most fearsome pirates of all time. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the name.
She was like, I think in English they call it Mistress Chen Yisao. And she and I share the same last name. So yeah, and it's because a lot of people who migrated from China to Taiwan came from a coastal province in China where many, many pirates came from. And this Mr. Sheng and another one called Zheng Cengong, who was someone who basically fought back the Dutch colonials in Taiwan. He also has the same last name as me. Like, so there's like not just one famous pirate, but two famous pirates where I share the last name from. So I do have a connection with her. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Obviously people who are families that are experiencing grief, I Miss You Most, a must have. People who, have elderly, family members who are ill, who we expect may pass. Great book for them. But what about another family? Everybody's healthy. We're all just loving it. What kind of conversations do you think those families can have if they read I Miss You Most?
I will say, I like sharing that book with those families because it helps you make the most of the time you have with the loved ones in your life, right? So my father, he's 74. He's going to be 74 this year. And I'm already thinking about that. I'm sort of a future thinker person. So I basically have had him basically I've sent him questions that he answers about his past life. And we turned it into a book that we can pass down to my daughter. And so pieces like that, where this story helps you sort of think about, hey, if I do go away, if I do pass away, or if my loved one passed away, like how will I remember them? And really making the most of your time with them, right? And so to me, it's like anyone who wants to start that process should start reading it while your loved ones are with you. So for me, I'm trying to make moments between my dad and my daughter while he's still around. We want to help her play golf with him. They go swimming together, go do these memories so that in the future, and I hope it's not like anytime in the near future, whenever he does pass away, that there's a wealth of memories and connection points that my daughter has to remember him, right? And so that's the piece there too. So even if all your family members are healthy, it is, unfortunately, death is inevitable, at least for right now, right? Death is inevitable. So starting those memories as soon as you can and helping kids know that that's important is just something healthy to do.
I love that idea, helping us cherish the moments that we have with our loved ones now more.
Yeah, definitely. I know I'm doing it.
We should tell everybody where they can go to find out more about you and find out more about I Miss You Most.
Sure. You can visit my website. It's called charlotte.art. And the very front page just shows a bunch of my books, and I Miss You Most is on there. You can also sign up for my email newsletter. That's where I send email news about my upcoming books and any events that I'm attending. So you can come find me and we can chat about your family and chat about your heritage as well.
Awesome. We've had a great time speaking to the author of I Miss You Most. And before I say goodbye, I want to let you know those books that you were talking about that are coming out in the future, you have an open invitation to come back on to celebrate those books.
Oh, happy to do so. I can't wait to talk about popsicles with you next year then.
That absolutely. Our guest has been Charlotte Cheng. Charlotte, thank you so much. And don't raid any boats or anything like that with that pirate background of yours. And
I'll keep that in mind. I'll definitely keep that in mind. Thanks so much for having me here.
Hey, my friends, when should you start to talk to your kids about money? Well, if you ask me, I would say as soon as possible. Helping our kids become financially literate is so very important. And thanks to owningthedash.com, talking to your kids about money and finances is easier than ever. Anthony Delaunay is a financial dad advisor and the founder of Owning the Dash LLC, an organization dedicated to promoting childhood financial literacy and family financial freedom. Delaunay has written a series of award-winning children's picture books that each teach basic lessons about money. He has also authored 2 financial self-help books geared towards helping young couples start their financial journey and towards helping older couples prepare for their transition into retirement. Owning the Dash empowers families by providing books, games, and activities that introduce fundamental financial lessons in a fun and engaging way, encouraging kids to think about certain scenarios and how they might respond, and help prepare kids for when they have to make important money decisions later in their life. All 5 of Anthony's books have been named Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Reads and would make a great addition to your family library. To learn more, please visit owningthedash.com. My friends, we are in for a treat. My guest and I have just been chatting for 5 minutes. I have a feeling we got a lot to talk about. Joining us from Southern California, our guest is here today to celebrate his brand new book. It's called Blueberry Fairy. Please welcome to the show, Rami Jandali. Hey, Rami, how are you?
Hey, Jed, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Delighted to have you on and really excited to have you tell us all about Blueberry Fairy.
All right. Well, I'd love the chance to talk about Blueberry Fairy and An Almond All Alone, which is my first book, but I'll start with the newest release. So Blueberry Fairy really came to fruition because I love food. I love eating. I love throwing, random things into foods, and fruits are one of my favorite types of foods. So blueberries happen to be my second favorite fruit, right behind mangoes. I threw them into a bowl of oatmeal once, and I thought, wouldn't it be cool if a blueberry came to life? And, since I was a little kid, I've always tried to breathe life into characters and provide them what their voices would sound like. And so I thought Blueberry Fairy had a nice ring to it, and it kind of followed the chronological alphabetical order of An Almond All Alone. And I had the A for an almond and then B for blueberry. And I just thought, well, wouldn't it be cool if this Blueberry Fairy had these magical powers and she just did all great things in a fictional land called Fruitopia. And she would just grant wishes. But of course, in every great story, you got to have the villain. You got to have the one that just wants what that protagonist has. So Blueberry Fairy is really just a lighthearted tale for children of all ages, even adults. I always like to cater to the inner child of adults too. And it talks about acceptance. It talks about wanting to accept each other for what they have and what we have as well. And it also talks about being grateful for what we already have. So without giving the whole story away, I would say that the antagonist, the raisin, he's wrinkly, he's bitter, he's just down on his luck. And he used to be a grape, so he used to be this good-looking, fresh fruit, and now he's kind of withered away to a raisin, and he wants what he no longer has, and that's his youth. And so he sees the Blueberry Fairy as an opportunity to revive that youth, and so he tries to use what she has as her special powers to bring back something that he no longer has. So I felt like it was a great way to remind children, adults, all of us that, sometimes we fail to count our blessings. We fail to realize what we really have. And it doesn't have to be a special power. Honestly, I think everyone's superpower is kindness. It's just being kind to others, spreading those smiles, spreading those laughs, and making everyone feel human again. It's not about having the greatest skills coming off the Olympics, right? It's not about having the greatest skills in the world. It's about being the kindest person in the room and the one that really can connect with others. And that's really what Blueberry Fairy is all about. It's about, seeing past the special powers that some of us have. And at the end of the day, really just getting down to the nitty gritty, which is, do you have a good heart? Do you have kindness?
I love that message of kindness. I also love the reminder to be grateful of what we have. One of the things, I'm one of those really annoying positive persons. I drive my wife and my niece, especially my niece, up a tree. It's just, it's bad today, but tomorrow's going to be better. And look at all the great things in your life. But I mean, it really is true that people, and we found out scientifically that if people who live gratefully are happier, they're healthier, they're able to endure pain more. I mean, and I love that we're living in a time where, some of these old, common sense wisdoms where they're being proved true. It's like, yes, not just something that's nice to say or that your grandmother taught you. There's science behind it. It really, really works.
Absolutely. I agree. And I too am like you. I think positivity can really generate a lot of positivity around you. We all go through our ups and downs, but if you have a good spirit, so I have 2 kids here at home, and I try and instill that message all the time that you're going to have days that just don't go your way. You're going to have things that just come up as challenges. But if you keep that positive mindset, things will get better. It's not the number of times you fall, it's the number of times you pick yourself up. And that's what I really feel like my main mission with my stories is just to inspire children, readers everywhere, parents that maybe need that reminder to just think positively, spread kindness, and just know that what we all have in our own walks of life is amazing in itself.
Yeah. I think that message is especially needed now because kids, I took a media literacy course probably 10, maybe 15 years ago. And at that time, the statistic was that kids are exposed to 3,000 media messages a day, whether it's in a song, in a movie, in a billboard, TV ad, newspaper ad, whatever. I have to think that number has quadrupled or quintupled, or, it's probably, we're probably talking 20,000 messages a day. And most of those messages are pretty negative. It's like, you're not cute enough. You don't have enough money. You don't have enough of this or that. And by the way, if you don't think like me, you're a horrible person and you should drown in the ocean. So I think it's really important that we talk to kids, instill that positivity in their lives. 'Cause boy, we need it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. One thing I do extracurricularly is that I coach my 5.5-year-old, who's my oldest, in a multitude of sports. And I feel like, outside of the sport itself, it's about getting them to feel good about themselves. It's that confidence. And, I feel like the characters in my stories embody that, maybe lack of self-confidence, and then they come by the end of the story to regain that confidence or to just feel better about themselves. So I agree with you. I think getting children, especially in this generation where technology is king and, pressures socially are just everywhere. And like you said, there's so many messages subliminally and directly that are being transmitted to them, and they're sponges. So they really do take on what is around them. And if you can be that source, that beacon of light in their lives to make them feel like, hey, it didn't work out today, but it will tomorrow. Or you didn't make that shot in basketball, but guess what? You're going to try again and you have a better shot at making it the next time. I think that constant reminder makes them feel good about themselves and doesn't let them succumb to the pressures that are always going to be around them.
Yeah. And one of the great things that I love about your message here is you're acknowledging that kids are going to fail. And it doesn't sound like you're a parent that bubble wraps their kids and is doing everything they can to make sure that they never experience a bump or a bruise or a scrape or a loss, because it's very unrealistic. It's never going to happen. And, in addition to being kind and thankful, I think being resilient is also a pretty important trait to have.
Absolutely. Resilience is such a lost art. It's such an important thing because a lot of times in life we're measured by winning and losing, and that's it. But I feel like losing is probably the most important life lesson that we can get, whether it's, at the level of competition or school or sports or just in life, because it's how you come back from that loss. It's what you learn from that loss, and it really builds character. So if I can mention just a really quick aside, in An Almond All Alone, the protagonist happens to be the opposite of the Blueberry Fairy. He's actually made fun of all the time. He's born different. He, doesn't have anyone on his side, and it just takes since that story's about nuts, one other nut to believe in him, to make him feel like he is enough, he is more than capable, and all of a sudden everything turns around for him. And I think that's what kids need these days. They need either someone to believe in them, whether it's a parent, a friend, a family member, or sometimes it's just a life lesson that makes them feel good about themselves, because that really translates to future successes.
Yeah. You just mentioned, being in your kid's corner, being behind them, being positive. I think sometimes parents are so worried about making sure the kid gets into the right school and puts pressure on kids and is always correcting kids. And that certainly is part of being a parent, but I think we forget sometimes how important it is for us to just be there and give our kids an attaboy anytime we can. We are, from the moment they came into our lives, we were the most important person in their lives. The reason reading with our kids is so powerful, one of the reasons, is because the most important person in a kid's life takes the time every night to sit down. And that just communicates so much. And we have to remember that as the kids get older and they're not 5.5 anymore, they're 8, they're 9, they're a teenager. Oh my God.
Oh no.
But they need that person in their corner more than ever.
Definitely. And storytelling here at our home is the same thing. It has two functions. It's to entertain, it's to educate, it's to do all of the fun things, but it's also to inspire them to be just good, family-oriented people that really know what the messages behind things are, because it's so easy to get clouded with everything around you. So storytelling is such a powerful tool. And like you said, whether they're 5 or 7 or 10, just taking the time to be able to share any story out there that has a good meaning and it has some kind of a fun twist to it can really go a long way. It's more than just the 5 minutes that it takes to read the story.
Yeah. You mentioned stories. I loved telling stories about family members who've passed away to my kids. And my daughter could tell you she never met my grandmother. My grandmother was an extremely cool lady. She used to take me to see the WWE. It was WWF.
Oh, wow. WWF, yeah.
Yeah, she would ride in the back of my motorcycle. Someone tried to pick her pocket one day at the wrestling matches, and she beat the kid up. But, my daughter can tell you all about her, and she never had a chance to meet her.
I love that. I really love that. That's the power of storytelling that goes beyond just books. It's just sharing memories about family members that they may have not met, and, being able to harness those as either life lessons or memories that either they can experience or they can actually use to just have a positive image of where it is that they came from.
Yeah. Tell me, have you always aspire to be a children's author?
Yes and no at the same time. The reason I say no is because I did take a few different routes in my life. I kind of went the unorthodox route of went to college, thought I knew what I wanted to study, and then the one constant in my life was always writing. Ever since I was a little kid, I loved to write, and I also loved to tell stories. Telling stories to me was a way of entertaining others and being entertained. So my grandpa, when he was alive, he would share stories, and whether they had any pertinence to anything that made sense to me or not, I was just mesmerized because there was some power in being able to sit down with someone, captivate them with a beginning, a middle. Sometimes there's no end. Sometimes there's just a cliffhanger. And, there's something about stories. And I felt like combining writing and stories, and I've always felt like a child at heart. No matter how old I get, I always feel like I have that inner child that comes out. And children's books, maybe in the last 10 years, kind of appeal to me a little bit more than just writing in general. It's, well, what's the audience I want to write to? how about relating to that I can relate to most, and that's that kid version of myself. So yes, I always wanted to be a writer. I think children's writing became more of like in the last 10 years that I realized that's really the audience I want to focus on. Maybe one day it'll be older children I'd write to, but I feel like kids are the best audience to write to, in my opinion.
Well, they're certainly a great audience. I made a living doing educational magic shows for 35 years, and it's different than writing because you have to wait for that feedback. I get it immediately, and they're very honest, they're very open, they're enthusiastic, and they're not afraid to share what they feel.
Absolutely. I love that about them.
Yeah. It's you're saying your grandfather was a storyteller.
He was. He absolutely was.
And it sounds like a lot of times with me, there'll be, I'll start a story and I'll get to the middle. I'm like, where is this going to end? I don't know. But so it ends right there. Did you have fun? Great.
There you go. There you go. Exactly. Entertainment is probably the main motivation to tell a story. But if you're trying to throw in a life lesson in there, then that's a double whammy.
Yeah, yeah. So you mentioned an Almond All Alone is your A book, Blueberry Fairy is your B book. Obviously, something about a mango is going to be your M book, but
naturally.
Where are we going? Is there only going to be 26 books in your career, or are you just going to expand off the line?
I don't know what I would do for X, Y, and Z, so that would be a tough one. But I do. I'd have to go with xylophones or maybe a character Xavier. But I think I started to think after Blueberry Fairy, before I continue down the alphabet, the intention was never really to go A, B, C all the way to Z. I'd love to publish 100,000 books, but I think I want to captivate my readers with series. So I'm thinking this is kind of the first that I've vocalized this. I'm thinking of doing a second Blueberry Fairy book. The way that I left off the book, I feel like there's so much more to tell that it could turn into maybe a 3 or 4 part series. So I'm already getting the wheels in motion as to where this next part would go. So before I go to C, I still want to do B part 2.
All right. That sounds good. I'm curious, what does your son think about his dad being an author?
So I have 2 boys. I have a 2.5-year-old and a 5.5-year-old. The 5.5-year-old is obviously more aware about the storytelling aspect. The 2.5-year-old listens to the books that we read to him. But my 5.5-year-old really has a vivid imagination, and that's something that I really connect with him on. And I feel like my 2.5-year-old is getting there too. But my 5.5-year-old really has an imagination where he asks myself or my wife to tell him a story throughout the day. Any time of the day, we could be cooking dinner and he's like, can you tell me a story? So it's on the spot. Boom. Think of something. It could be about literally anything. And then that turns into his rebuttal story. And then he'll tell you a story that's kind of similar. And just watching his brain work in that way really gets, it puts a smile on my heart, but it really gets me going, because then I want to create a series with him. I want to try and, create this improvisational story series just on the spot with him, and we bounce off characters that we just make up on the fly. So it's a beautiful thing, because you could tell that that's the one thing he gives his undivided attention to. It's when you tell him a story.
That's so very, very cool. Wow. Super. Have you ever had this, because you're talking about improv stories, and I certainly did a lot of improving on stage. Sometimes it got me into trouble, but have you ever told a story and your kid loved it so much, and then the next night they say, hey, tell that story again, and you're like, what story are you talking about?
Oh my God.
No idea.
That's probably a weekly thing here. Absolutely. I think we were doing a drive, him and me. We were going to a tennis tournament a couple hours away, and there was a lot of downtime, and he asked me for a lot of stories. And on the way back, he asked me, it was just that night, he asked me to continue where we left off, and I had no recollection of where we left off. So I probably went back and was redundant and, retold him 18 of the same stories. But I think that's the beauty of it, because every time you tell a story, it's told differently. It might still have the same core, but that's kind of one of the charms of storytelling, is that it's less about the exact words. It's more about that improvisational delivery of what it is that you're trying to impart. It's the color, it's the vivid imagery. It's my goal with storytelling has always been to make others feel like they were a part of that story, or like they were that fly on the wall that was witnessing what was going on. Whether it's something that happened in my personal life, or I'm recounting someone else's tale, I like to paint a very colorful picture, and I want that person to feel like they were a part of it.
Yeah. I'm listening to you and I'm agreeing with you, telling a story in a really animated way with lots of energy. Of course, you know, when there's so many parents out there, they say, oh, I got to read that book again. But it's like, you don't have to read it the same way again. You can read it in a different way. I'm sure there are people out there thinking to themselves, yeah, Jandali, Rami, yeah, you guys, this is natural for you, but I'm not that kind of guy. I'm not that kind of woman. I don't have that personality. What advice can you do? What inspirational talk can you do to let them know that they can be more animated in the storytelling?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question because, like you said, there's different personalities out there, and some want to just get through the book or maybe tell the kids what the theme is. But for me, I feel like it comes down to being a child at heart. We were all children at one point in time. And when I was a little kid, I always loved doing voices and impressions and accents and really breathing life into either people we knew or fictional characters. And I feel like if every parent can just channel that inner child that they have, just take a second to remember what it was like being read to or listening to a story for the first time or watching a cartoon for the first time and just having your eyes wide open, trying to understand why this is so entertaining. And I think if you can channel that, you can bring it to life. So with my sons, a lot of times what I do is I'll read that same story, but now all of a sudden the voice of the characters changes. So, you know, I can give them a Southern accent or I can, you know, start to make them sound a little bit more villainous. And I think it changes the complexion of it because the words aren't changing. It's just the way that they're perceiving those characters is maybe a little different. So just have fun with it. That's my biggest advice is have fun with it. Don't get through the pages like you're reading some kind of manuscript. Actually read it because there's life to that story. Because those stories can be turned into movies, cartoons, shows. So the way that happens is where you draw that picture of who that character is and you make them sound a certain way. So make them sound the way that you want to make them sound and just run with it.
Yeah, I love that idea of tapping into your inner child, and everybody has it. One of the most fun things that I did in my career is when I would go to a middle school to perform, or if I'm at a K through 8 school and I had the first show for the young kids, and then the principal would come and go, oh, my middle schoolers are coming in and all they're horrible. And then they come in and they see this guy with a goofy shirt on and a hat, and they're sitting there thinking, I'm too cool for this. And then you get into it, and 2 minutes in, they're into it, and they're laughing and giggling like little kids. And, you know, and the principal will come up to me all the time and go, you humanize them. Oh my gosh, I can love them again. They were kids. And that's a beautiful thing.
Absolutely. I agree. I think you can really connect with kids of all ages, even those tough teenage years. And then even parents, like you asked me earlier about, you know, parents that maybe don't really want to get animated or don't necessarily have all the energy at 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. to, you know, divulge to their kids for that last 5 or 10 minutes. But I really think if you tap into your inner child, you'll be surprised. You'll see a lot of energy in your own way come out, whether it's through voices, whether it's through intonations of, you know, different scenes and making one thing sound more dramatic than the other. I think your kid will start to realize, wow, you're really into it the way that they're going to be into it.
Wonderful. Before I ask you for your website, I need to share something with you. Just this past weekend, I spoke at the Indie Author Summit in Kansas City, and I was asked to get up and talk about how authors can get, especially indie authors, can get publicity for themselves, get themselves on podcasts. And I showed them a number of different pitches that I receive. I receive a couple of dozen pitches a day. And so I showed them the big professional pitch that I get from Penguin Random House, and then another from another publishing company. But I shared your pitch because your pitch was personalized. It talked a little bit about the show and then told me about you. And I thought it was the perfect pitch, especially from an indie author doing it all himself. What kind of advice to those indie authors that are out there that might have been at that Kansas City summit? what kind of advice can you give to them to help them boost their confidence when they're pitching, marketing their books, selling their books?
Well, first of all, I want to say I appreciate you saying that. That really means a lot to me. So thank you for doing that. I would say I always like to boil things down simply. I say keep it simple and keep it you. If you make it sound overly professional, overly corporate, like you said, publishing house. I'm not a publishing house. The next person, an indie author is not a publishing house. Make it sound like you. So I will talk the way that Rami talks, Joseph will talk the way Joseph talks. I think if you personalize something and you come off genuine in that regard, whether it's a podcaster, whether it's an interviewer, whether it's someone that, wants to really promote the next big story, I think they'll see that authenticity if you're coming out as a person rather than this, professional, suited, tied type of person. So I really think if you just keep it the way that you are, your authentic self will come out and your stories will shine almost secondarily. Because I think the author brand, I'm still starting. I only have 2 books, but I really feel like my best asset and the greatest asset of all indie authors is themselves, their personalities, their drives, their ambitions, what made their story happen. Because everyone has a different story. We're talking about stories, but everyone has a different origin story as to why they became an author, why children, like you asked me earlier, maybe they want to venture into, nonfiction at one point, whatever it is, what your inspirations are. And I think you can get that across when you connect with someone like you're talking to them in person, like you and me are talking right now. So my best advice is keep it you, keep it simple. Don't pretend to have to sound a certain way just to be able to maybe leverage your position. Just talk the way that you would in person if you were meeting someone and you're trying to tell them, hey, this is why I became an author. This is why I love writing. And here are the messages that I always want to impart with my books.
Awesome. Where can we go to find out more about Blueberry Fairy and Almond All Alone and find out more about you?
Oh, for sure. So I just started my website. It's in its very nascent stages. It's called ramistories.com, and that's RAMISTORIES. And the origin of Rami Stories came about maybe about 20 years ago. Anytime I would tell a story, like we talked about earlier, there would be a lot of animation to it, energy, vividness. So I had friends from different circles say, oh, here we go. It's another Rami story coming. It's a Rami story. So that kind of was the origin story of why I called my website and eventually my brand Rami Stories. It's because they're stories told by me the way that maybe only I can tell them. But if someone else wanted to write about a blueberry, they would tell it in their own way with their own voice. So my website is ramistories.com. And then I am currently selling my books on Amazon. So if you were to go on Amazon and you type in Blueberry Fairy, you'll see my name there, or An Almond All Alone, you'll see my name there, and you'll be able to see those books and the reviews that I've been very blessed to have received so far.
Awesome. We've had a great time speaking to the author of A Blueberry Fairy. It's the latest book from our guest, Rami Jandali. Rami, thanks so much for being with us.
Oh, Jed, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much, and I hope to talk to you in the future.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Reading with Your Kids and that it inspired you to subscribe to the show so you don't miss a second of all the excitement we'll be bringing you. I'm so very lucky to have an opportunity to speak to these amazing authors, and they're just great human beings, and they're trying to entertain your kids and you. What a wonderful mission in life. I just feel so blessed, and I thank you all. Thank you all for spreading the word about the show. Thank you all for those of you who've written reviews. Thank you so much for that, giving us a rating. We really appreciate it. I'd appreciate it if you could connect with us on social media, facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, at Reading With Your Kids on Instagram, and at Jedley Magic on X. Please be sure to check out our YouTube channel, youtube.com/readingwithyourkids. You can find all of our STEM is Family Fun and Drawing with Your Kids videos on our YouTube channel. And of course, you are always welcome to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Check out our blog. Visit our Read With Your Kids Certified Great Read Wall of Fame. And we really would love for you to use the contact button up at the top of the page to let us know what you think about the show. Let us know what we're doing well. Let us know what we could be doing better. And most importantly, let us know who you would like to hear on a future episode of the show. That's really, really helpful. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we'll start by thanking our guest, Charlotte Cheng. please be sure to check out I Miss You Most. And Rami Jandali, please be sure to check out Blueberry Ferry. I want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Chris Doherty, Rory Grady, Judy Hu, Stella Sheree, Hannibal Sanj, Elisa Montiero, Devin Hill, Riley Oluwu. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place. And you do that every time you read with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next episode of Reading with Your Kids.